yards on the right,
yeah.
going towards Northwich,
yeah.
there's a farmyard, and that's just like these three gentlemen, or three men, attacking a man.
How long ago was that?
About 5 minutes.
On a June evening in 2003, the quiet isolation of Burnt House Farm in Tabley, Cheshire, was shattered when 4 men arrived with violent intent. Christopher Guestmore Jr., John Wilson, James Raven, and Otis Matthews had come to collect on a £20,000 drug debt they claimed Brian Waters owed. The remote location of the farm, which Waters used for cannabis cultivation, meant there were no nearby neighbours to hear what was about to unfold, and the rural setting that had made the property ideal for his illegal operation now left him dangerously vulnerable. Brian Waters was a father of 2. He had a daughter, Natalie, 21, and a son, Gavin, 25. Brian was known to have been growing a cannabis farm at Burnt House Farm in Knutsford, Cheshire, in England. Sadly, Brian was in extreme debt and owed a drug dealer by the name of John Wilson £20,000. Christopher Guestmore Jr. was an undercover TV researcher who befriended John in order to sell a story to the media about him. Christopher had followed Gavin to his father's cannabis farm and immediately alerted John. John and 2 men called James Raven and Otis Matthews, as well as Christopher himself, lay in wait for Brian to arrive back at his farm. One of the cannabis farm's workers, Suleiman Razak, was attacked when he arrived. Brian's wife Julie was abducted from her Nantwich home and brought to the farm. When Gavin arrived back at the farm with his sister Natalie, they were attacked. When Brian arrived, the group immediately tied him up before torturing him brutally for 3 hours, whilst Gavin and Natalie were forced to watch. Brian was hung upside down by his ankles and beaten with a metal pipe and canes and tortured with a staple gun and continuously dumped in barrels of water. The group then put a bin bag over Brian's head and set it alight so that the plastic would melt down into his face. Brian died from the torture. The torturers then fled the scene. Waters' children were present in the home during the attack, a fact that adds an almost incomprehensible dimension of cruelty to the crime. The assault was prolonged and methodical, lasting several hours as the 4 men worked together to inflict injury after injury on Waters. The attack was so severe that the subsequent post-mortem examination would document over 100 separate injuries across his body, including fractured ribs, a broken nose, a shattered breastbone, bleeding on the brain, and bruising to the heart. As the violence continued inside the farmhouse, something remarkable happened that would later prove crucial to the investigation. A local person, hearing or witnessing something concerning, made the decision to contact police. This call would bring authorities to the scene, though tragically not in time to save Waters' life.
Connecting payphone 01565 722 252.
Thank you. Hello, please.
Hello, hiya. I've just come off the M6 for Manchester Airport. I'm not sure the junction is 18.
Yeah.
Going towards Northwich, up is it the A556?
Yes.
I've got up there, and the first farm on the right-hand side,
Yep.
it was about 500 yards. It looked like there was 3 men beating somebody up in the courtyard.
All right.
It didn't look like...
So if you come off at junction 18 and take the 556, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's 18.
It's 19, that one, actually, I think.
19, yeah, 556.
Yeah.
About 500 yards on the right,
Yeah.
going towards Northwich,
Yeah.
in a farmyard, and that's just like these 3 gentlemen, or 3 men, attacking a man.
How long ago was that?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes ago. Okay, so what's your name, please?
I'd rather not get involved, you know.
No, fair enough, okay, I'll look into it for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, bye.
The caller's willingness to report what they observed represents a critical moment in the case. In rural areas, where people often mind their own business, and criminal enterprises rely on isolation and silence, this act of civic responsibility ensured that the crime wouldn't go entirely unnoticed. After Waters succumbed to his injuries, the perpetrators attempted to destroy evidence by setting fire to the farmhouse. Arson is a common tactic in murders connected to organised crime, as fire can destroy forensic evidence, obscure the cause of death, and buy perpetrators time to flee. The flames that consumed Burnt House Farm were meant to erase what had happened within its walls, to reduce the crime scene to ash and make investigation difficult, if not impossible. However, the earlier call to police meant that emergency services responded while evidence could still be recovered. Fire investigators and forensic specialists were able to examine the scene despite the damage, and crucially, the post-mortem examination could still be conducted on Waters' body, documenting the extensive injuries that told the story of what he had endured. Without that phone call from a concerned local resident, the investigation might have faced far greater obstacles, and justice might have been even more delayed, or potentially never achieved. The physical evidence recovered from the scene, combined with witness statements and other investigative work, allowed police to identify the 4 perpetrators relatively quickly. John Wilson, James Raven, and Otis Matthews were arrested, tried, and convicted of murder, receiving life sentences for their roles in Waters' death. The evidence against them was substantial enough to secure convictions despite the fire damage to the crime scene, a testament to both the thoroughness of the forensic investigation and the strength of other evidence gathered. Christopher Guest. Moore Jr., however, managed to evade arrest in the immediate aftermath. While his 3 accomplices were apprehended and faced justice, Moore fled the country, beginning a 16-year period as a fugitive that would ultimately span 2 decades before his capture. His escape likely involved careful planning and possibly assistance from others, as international flight requires resources, false documentation, and knowledge of how to avoid detection. Moore made his way to Malta, where he assumed a false identity and attempted to build a life beyond the reach of British law enforcement. For the Waters family, the fire that consumed their home added another layer of trauma to an already devastating loss. Not only had they lost Brian in horrific circumstances, with his children witnessing the attack, but the family home, the physical space filled with memories and possessions, was also destroyed. The arson meant there was no returning to the place where they had lived, no familiar surroundings to provide even minimal comfort during their grief. Everything was gone, reduced to ruins by perpetrators attempting to cover their tracks. The local person who called police deserves recognition as an unsung hero in this case. In rural communities, there can be strong cultural pressures against involving authorities, particularly when criminal enterprises like cannabis farms operate with an implicit understanding that neighbors won't interfere. Yet this individual, hearing or witnessing something wrong, chose to act. Their call ensured that police arrived at the scene, that evidence could be preserved despite the fire, and that the investigation could proceed with crucial information about timing and circumstances. Without that intervention, the case might have unfolded very differently. The convergence of violence, arson, and community response at Burnt House Farm in June 2003 set in motion a legal process that would span nearly 2 decades. 3 men faced immediate justice, serving life sentences for their participation in Waters' murder. 1 man fled and lived in freedom for 16 years before finally being tracked down, extradited, and convicted. A family was left to grieve an unimaginable loss while rebuilding their lives from ashes, both literal and figurative. And a community was reminded of both the darkness humans are capable of inflicting and the importance of speaking up when something is wrong. The Brian Waters case ultimately became a story about accountability delayed but not denied, about the persistence of investigators who never closed the file on Christopher Guest Moore Jr., and about a justice system that, despite its flaws and the time required, eventually ensured that all 4 perpetrators faced consequences for their actions. The caller's willingness to report what they observed represents a critical moment in the case. In rural areas, where people often mind their own business, and criminal enterprises rely on isolation and silence, this act of civic responsibility ensured that the crime wouldn't go entirely unnoticed. After Waters succumbed